Hello there, everyone. This is Aaron St. Dennis, the FF Mad Scientist, and welcome back to the Mad Science Lab podcast. Today, we are continuing on with Studs and Duds, and here to help me out with that is Brett B., better known on Twitter as Dad Bod Brett. That's a mouthful. I almost didn't get it out. Thank you, Brett, for joining me. It's a pleasure to have you.
Yeah, happy to be here.
Would you like to take a second to tell everyone where they can find you?
Yeah, I mean, you said it. Follow me on Twitter at Dad Bod Brett. I tell my own jokes, and my jokes are probably not why you follow me, or maybe they are, but some fantasy analysis and some bad dad humor.
I like bad dad jokes. That's all I do on Twitter. You go on my feed, it's half fantasy football and it's half those, you know what it is between it's dad jokes or the dark humor jokes, the ones where they each have a mouthful of water and someone in the middle reads a joke and they try not to spit it out. Some of those are hilarious. I spend way too much time. I'll get in bed for like 10 o'clock. Next thing I'll know, 3 hours will pass by and I'm flipping through dad jokes on TikTok. It's addicting.
Yeah, doom scrolling TikTok and Twitter are you lose so much time doing those.
Oh, see, I don't do it on Twitter. I scroll through about 4 posts on Twitter and I'm like, oh, fuck this. I'm done. These guys are idiots. Twitter infuriates me. TikTok's just all fun and happy stuff. It's hilarious. What was the one I seen yesterday? That little kid at the baseball diamond. I must have watched 100 times. Have you seen that TikTok?
Which one? What does he do?
Okay, there's a mother and a father in the background, and there's a little kid. He's got to be maybe 8-10 years old. And I don't know, some woman outside the camera that you can't see says, your penis is the size of a Tic Tac. And out of nowhere, the kid fires back instantly with, yeah, that's why your mom's breath is so fresh. His dad loses his shit.
I saw that one.
I must have watched that 30 times. It's hilarious. So anyways, this is not the comedy hour show. This is fantasy football.
We'll save that for the last.
Yeah, let's get into it. We got Dallas running back Tony Pollard, finished as RB8 last year, 1,007 rushing yards, 371 receiving yards, 12 touchdowns, 266.3 full PPR points, good for 15.55 per game. Fantasy Pros ADP is 22 overall. He's stayed 22 even throughout the week. RB9 overall. What are your thoughts on Tony Pollard?
Yeah, I mean, my thing with Tony is that I think he's just being overdrafted right now. I understand the hype after his very efficient year last year, and especially Zeke was completely washed last year, and Tony was an incredible pick and investment. But at RB8, RB9 in that, early second round range, it's going way too early. I think he's being gobbled up at his peak. And, in my opinion, I know last year he finished in that range, which is pretty surprising for the type of back he is. But I think he landed there with a lot of injuries to other backs, which always happens. So I really think you're getting him at his peak. And I do think that they will add someone. I mean, there's even talks that they could add Zeke back at a lower price. So I just don't see him becoming a bell cow and living up to some of the hype that we're seeing between his ADP and Twitter and different content that's out there right now.
I am bringing up his overall ADP. Oh, damn it, stupid graphic. The overall ADP here, and first thing I noticed, I don't particularly want any of the running backs in this range at the end of the second. Once we get to about Chubbs and Jacobs in the middle of the second, I'm either going quarterback or one of these receivers. Don't really want Henry, don't really want Pollard, don't really want Stevenson, Najee, Brees, at least not this year for Brees. I would much rather have Mahomes, probably Mahomes or Allen. Mahomes definitely if he's cheaper, but like St. Brown, Garrett Wilson, Hurts, Waddle, Smith. I think this is definitely a spot where if I pick late in the second round, I am not going with a running back. What are your thoughts on this range here at the end of the second round.
Yeah, and I think you're spot on. Like it's not so much that I like the other running backs around him more. I don't like taking him so high, and I much rather take a Waddle, a Mon-Ra. I mean, if Wilson falls there, so I think I would pivot to receiver. I mean, Brees, by the time we start drafting for redraft, if Brees seems like he's going to be healthy, I may take him over Pollard. I like Higgins.
Even Olave down here
Is sneaking out there. Might want to reach a little bit for Andrews, depending on format. So, yeah, it's not so much the running backs around him, like you said. It's the other receivers and maybe even a QB, if depending on format.
I agree. Let's see. Who would you like next?
Who you got for me? Let's go with a stud for me.
Who's your other stud? Or who's your first stud?
Let's go Monty.
I do. You want Monty? Okay, yeah. I do the thing where I load up the 4 guys, but I don't want to know. I don't look to see if they're your stud or your dud until you tell me, because I don't like to have an argument in my head. I like to just wing it on the fly and not know which side I'm going with. So he is your stud, you said?
Yeah. So let's go back to back with running backs.
Detroit. Sorry, let me go through his stats.
Yeah.
Detroit running back, newly acquired, David Montgomery. That sounds so weird to say. RB24 last year, 801 rushing yards, 316 through the air, 6 touchdowns, 183.2 fantasy points for 11.11 per game. Current ADP is 80 overall on Fantasy Pros. Let's bring up the RB section here and see where that puts him. He's actually moved up to 76, which is RB 26 overall. Why is he your stud?
Yeah, I think he's an absolute smash at ADP. I think they're paying him decent money to get a role. They snagged him away from a division rival. And it's not fair to assume that they're going to directly replace what they had in Jamal Williams and DeAndre Swift with David Montgomery and Jahmyr Gibbs. But that is what Jamal Williams did last year shows you the potential that a running back can have behind this offensive line. And the scheme that they ran also shows you the, potential for this offense. And I don't think that defense got much better. So they might still be in a bunch of shootouts. There's, a lot of potential for David Montgomery to be that goal line back and that bruiser to Jahmyr Gibbs is, I don't want to call him a scat back because he's not, but more like that move him around the field, third down back, between the 20s guy. So if that's the role that plays out for them, then both of them actually hit at ADP, and David Montgomery's a steal.
Yeah, he's someone who's on pretty much all of my stud lists too. They're just paying him too much. They made a big contribution to him. He was decent last year in Chicago. I don't think he's going to have Jamal Williams 17 touchdowns, but he's probably going to have a decent workload. To say he'd have 10 touchdowns, I think it's probably very likely. And going at, what did I say? He's up to 76 overall. Like, okay, so we get a weird spot here. I love Ayuk and Deontay this year. So those 3 in a row are like, I'd love to have those 3 picks. If I could trade down a couple and grab 3 right here in a row, I'd love it. Then after that, you get, Dak's good if you're looking for a safe quarterback, but I'm not crazy about Waller. Don't like Pickens, hate Madison, hate Cook, hate Hollywood. Treylon's risky. Like, these 3 here feel like the last of the targets that I really, really want. What do you think about this spot here in the 70s?
Yeah, especially most of the builds I've been doing lately on Underdog or mock drafts, I'm taking receivers early, and then I'm taking guys like Monty and James Conner as my primary running backs, probably overload late on backup running backs and see if there's any, preseason injuries or things like that. So, but Montgomery is one of those guys that's going to have a lot of standalone value. So he's not he's a later round guy, talking about if you're taking him as your first running back. And and he'll have a lot of standalone value.
I didn't cheat. I had the graphics loaded up, so I didn't cheat to see who you had. It's amazing that the next two on your list are Deontay and Ayuk. So one of these two I'm going to really agree with, and one of them you're going to really disappoint me. But who do you want to start with here, Deontay or Ayuk?
Let's go to Deontay.
All right. Both of those guys are on my studs list, but we've got Steelers, almost said Eagles. Steelers receiver Deontay Johnson finished as wide receiver 30 last year, despite having a rookie quarterback and not scoring a single touchdown. 882 receiving yards, no touchdowns, as I mentioned. 159.7 full PPR points, good for 10.57 per game. 65th overall in ADP, but as we just said, he has since dropped to 75th overall. I'm going to switch to wide receiver here and see where that brings him in. That brings him in as wide receiver 33, two above Pickens, below the likes of Jerry, Judy, Williams. I love this range here. I love Deontay Johnson. I'm really hoping he's your stud, but is he a stud or a dud for you?
He's a stud for me. And it's funny. I mean, you said it when we were looking at Monty because they're somewhat in the same range. It's crazy to me that him and Pickens are essentially going back to back. So it's like pick your poison for anyone drafting in that range.
In the ADP though, they've got it where Deontay's been one or two spots ahead of Pickens. In all the drafts I've done, Pickens has gone first. So I don't. That's
Pickens,
insane.
I bet a lot of people are going to go Pickens because they think the crazy athleticism, the circus catches is upside, but Deontay is both safe and upside. I mean, like you said, he had a rookie QB and no touchdowns last year, and he still finished wide receiver 30. You're buying him at his floor 3 years in a row, over 140 targets, 26% target share. He, top 10 in the league in target share since 2020. The guy is just consistent, and I don't see Pickens overtaking him in target share or as the wide receiver one. So I think he's a slam dunk at that ADP. And again, like depending on where your build, how they fall to you. I mean, but I would double smash Monty and Deontay almost on any build in any format.
I really hope we get to the preseason when all the casual drafters are coming back and George Pickens is making one-handed catch after one-handed catch against backup corners. Drive that price right up so that I can have Deontay cheap. I love it. I don't see how, like I said, rookie quarterback, it could only get better.
Yeah.
0 touchdowns. It can only get better. And yet somehow he still beat this ADP by 3 wide receiver slots last year. He cannot, aside from injury, he cannot underperform this ADP. I don't see it at all.
Yeah, I agree. It's a very safe ADP with a ton of upside. I mean, and I think you mentioned it earlier also. I kind of love this range because I do like London. I do like Evans.
I like Lockett.
I like Hollywood. Kirk. I mean, I don't mind Lockett, but out of this bunch, Deontay is my pick, and I see him falling to me quite often, and I'm smashing whenever he's there.
But this is amazing for me because this right here, this is where the cutoff is. Deontay and Hollywood. After this, I don't really want any of these guys this year. Maybe like Dotson, I don't mind. Addison and JSN, I'll take for the right price. Burks late, but like I don't really want any of these guys here in this range. Like I guess if you look here, they're going 20 picks later, but I'm just let me switch over here to the actual overall and see who's going in his range. Shit, what was he? 70, 75? 75. So here's his range. We've got Watson, who I'm out on. Javonte, I think, is going to be injured. Love Ayuk, love Johnson, love Montgomery. Then we go back to what I said last for the Monty breakdown. Don't really like Waller. Dak's okay. Pickens don't like. Madison don't like. Cook don't like. Hollywood and Burks, meh, maybe. Like these 3 here are the gateway to just the freaking abyss. Like, is there anybody below? Like, where'd they go? Right here. Is there anybody below here that you'd even consider? Like Hollywood, maybe? I don't even
Yeah,
like
I'm
Hollywood.
not completely out on Hollywood. My biggest worry with Hollywood is not himself, but rather Kyler Murray's health, which is like we're not hearing anything on. And then in that screen is two guys that I view, and I don't want to dog Tony Pollard too much, but I view similarly to Pollard, which is Madison and Cook. I'm not in love with them, so yeah, I mean Deontay in that range is an absolute smash for me. And I'm
Yeah.
sorry that this means that your boy Brandon Ayuk is a dud for me.
No, you know what? Okay, it's not even. I'm going to run through the stats before I say it. But he's San Francisco wide receiver Brandon Ayuk, wide receiver 15 last year, 23 rushing yards, 1,015 receiving yards, 8 touchdowns, 209.8 full PPR points, good for 13.4 per game. I'm not even a Brandon Ayuk guy. I do not even like Brandon Ayuk. The fact that he outscored Debo last year, he is going, let me bring it up right here. Where the hell's the wide receivers? Just a sec. He is, okay, so Debo is going off the board right around, where is he? Wide receiver 16, 37th overall. If I have this memorized, Ayuk's going 73rd overall, 74th overall. So you've got wide receiver 16 here who was outproduced by his teammate who's wide receiver 32. And like I said, it's not that I love Brandon Ayuk. It's just that I think for receiver this year, in redraft anyways, the cutoff is DK Metcalf. You look here, stud, all the way down to DK. This is where it gets dicey. If you want to move Cooper up, okay. If you trust Allen or Hopkins, okay. But once we get to Debo, it starts to get dicey. I avoid this group from Debo all the way down to about Godwin, maybe even Kirk. And then I start to pepper in Kirk, London, Lockett, Evans, Ayuk, and Deontay later in drafts. Like that's, I just think the value is there. I'm not the Ayuk guy. I just think I'm going to take the guy who finished higher last year and is half the price to his teammate. But I get like dud based on talent, but
Yeah, I totally dig the strategy that you're laying out there. And similarly, I don't hate Ayuk. I just think that he is the third or fourth option on his team.
Too many mouths to feed. I
they're
agree.
they're gonna force CMC the ball. I think they're gonna get the ball into Debo's hands more. Kittle, when healthy, is another guy that's gobbling up targets. If by chance Lance either outright wins the job or becomes a starter at some point, then there's no way that they're feeding 4 guys. So yeah, I mean those are all the reasons why I'm out on Ayuk. I think he's very talented. I think he's a guy that you should be probably targeting in Dynasty and when he gets either when he leaves San Fran or when they make moves for the future and can't keep all 4 of these guys, then yeah, he's probably wide receiver 1 upside. But I'm not buying it for today. For right now in the current offense and with the current risk.
I also believe that CMC affects Debo more. In the games where CMC was on the team, Ayuk seemed to have the biggest role out of all the non-CMC players, whereas Debo looked like he took the greatest hit. We'll see in the event that all 3 pass catchers and CMC are healthy, who takes a hit and who doesn't. But I like the value on Ayuk, so that's why I'm in on him. All right, that's a wrap there. Do you want to take a second again to tell everyone where they can find you?
Sure. Like we said earlier, at Dad Bod Brett on Twitter for mildly good fantasy advice and jokes.
Well, that's all you can ask. Just mildly good. That's all you can ask for. That's what I aim for. All right. Well, this has been Studs and Duds with Dad Bod Brett. Once again, I am Aaron St. Dennis, the FF Mad Scientist. This has been the Mad Science Lab podcast. Thank you to Brett for joining me, and thank you everyone for tuning in. Have a good night.